to go? Yeah. Right. Those of us that's here, welcome to this afternoon's Planning Committee, every Woollen division. First things first, if you can put phones on vibrate or switch them off, which I haven't done yet, but I will do. Minutes of previous membership. Bit thin on ground today, by the look of it. I'll give Councillor Lowe's apologies. Her mother was taken into hospital last night, didn't get released until late, so Gwen's taking care of her today, so I'm standing in her place. We took a vote this morning on bus, so it's all been done. Okay. I gather we've got an apology from Councillor Anwar. Any more apologies?
Thanks, Chair. There's also apologies from Councillor Dadd, Councillor Sheard and Councillor Stephen.
Right. Next item, minutes of the previous meeting. We agree those as a true record? Q. Any declarations of interest and lobbying? I'll start with Councillor Ramsey.
None.
Councillor Pavez?
None.
Councillor Luna?
None.
Councillor Lukic?
None, Chair.
Councillor Lawson? Councillor Pinnock?
Yes, the same item. I've been lobbied on quite a lot relating to this site, not necessarily the footpath, but I suppose to be on the safe side, I'd better declare that I have been lobbied, but I haven't. I know it's a little bit different with footpaths. I can express an opinion on that. But anyway, sorry.
Councillor Gregg?
None, Chair.
And I've been lobbied, well, I've received a lengthy email on page 9, which is the Cleckheaton footpath one. Right. Item 4, admission of the public. We're live on YouTube and what have you. I don't think we're on TikTok yet, but you never know. Item 5, any deputations or petitions? No. Any questions? Right, we did site visits this morning at Kirklees and also at Carside Crescent Batley. Right. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit shorter today because we've had one application that's given backward. You want to?
Thank you, Chair. So, members, you may have seen in the update, item 11, application 2022/92368. So the site at Lily Lane, Grangemore. The application has been withdrawn by the applicant prior to committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Page 9, item 9. And this is Whitechapel Road, Cleckheaton, and it's Giles to explain what's going to happen, hopefully.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just bring up the plan first. Good afternoon. My name is Giles Cheetham and I work for the Council on Public Rights of Way matters. The item before the committee is not a planning permission application, but concerns an application to the Council for an order to stop up and divert public footpaths at a housing development site further to the Council's grant of planning consent in 2021. The basis for the proposed change to the public footpaths is that it would allow for the constructions of houses, gardens, etc. The Public Rights of Way team conducted an informal preliminary consultation on the public footpath proposal in July 2022. The Council's constitution requires a decision to be made by committee where there is no majority support for the proposal from ward members. In this case, one ward member has raised an objection and the other 2 ward members who sit on this committee have offered no response to date. Conditional planning permission for the erection of 122 dwellings, landscaping and associated infrastructure was issued in June 2021, further to the Strategic Planning Committee decision of the 28th of April 2021. The public footpath proposal is shown on Plan 1, which is on the screen at the moment. The current legal line of public footpaths proposed to be permanently closed is shown by the bold, solid black line A, B, C, D. The proposed new public footpath alignments within the development are shown by the dashed black lines up the east and west parts of the site and joining across the north. The M62 motorway is situated to the west of the site and is clear on the plan. The Council has received consultation responses from 3 parties which question or oppose the footpath proposal before members. These are from Councillor Kath Pinnock, Ward Member, the Peak and Northern Footpath Society and the Open Spaces Society. These responses to the consultation are described at section 4 of the report along with officer comment. Further responses from consultees and further officer comment are included in the committee update papers for this item. Officers have responded in writing to these consultation responses. Officers are satisfied that it is appropriate for committee to give authority for an order to be made. Public rights of way planning and other council officers continue to work on delegated decisions for discharge of planning condition applications, including those 3 conditions specifically relating to public footpaths in the 2019 Planning Commission. And just for clarification, those are conditions 8, 9 and 10. Members have the report and appendices, the report summary and the update papers. Thank you, Chair.
Giles. 2 speakers. Stephen Hill.
He's on Teams.
On Teams.
Oh, can you stop sharing the screen, Giles? Williams, can you ask him again? Are we muted? No.
No. Stephen, we think that you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself? Hello? Right, Stephen, you've got 3 minutes starting from now.
Okay. Steve, I'm the local correspondent for the Open Space Society. We would ask the committee members to consider whether pre-commencement condition 10 has been discharged. 10 states prior to the development commencing, a detailed scheme shall be submitted and be approved in writing by the local planning authority for the protection and public safety of Stratford 24 and 42 footpaths. If the details of such a scheme have not been made available and approved, then the development would be a breach of planning consent. A TTRO has been used to carry out emergency works ahead of the order to divert the public rights of way, and the TTRO has been extended. Rights of way circular 1-09 is clear. The requirements for making this order, temporary closures need to be lifted as reinstated until an order is made to divert these footpaths. House building works has commenced on the southern end of the site. We prepare considerable work associated with site infrastructure. The OSS have pointed out to Kirklees Port officers that the situation now faced, when development should have commenced, would be a clear enforcement matter. Following a site visit I made on the 1st of February, a number of houses are on sale, but it appears housing works have not commenced on the site affected the public rights of way. Ongoing works relating to the site infrastructure would, however, appear to make use of the road possible. The OSS has given concerns, given development already been covered, whether an order can still be made under section 257. 257 is not available, development is substantially complete. We ask that the planning committee take their own view of this matter. It is, however, the case that before confirming the confirming authority would need to be satisfied that the order meets the relevant test, which in case law has been identified as the necessity test and the merits test. I know we will meet the necessity test if there is no valid planning permission at this stage. The OSS questions the validity of the planning permission considering a possible breach of planning precondition. Noting that emergency works would appear completed, we also ask the planning committee members to consider the appropriateness of using a TTRO to gain early access to the site and commence housing works. OSS considers the use of TTROs to extend the process of permanent diversions under the TCPA is an abuse of the authority's powers. Councils should be very careful not to undermine the diversion process by granting temporary closures, which in effect permanently close these footpaths ahead of completion of the TCPA process. At the strategic planning meeting, the planning application for 122 houses on the site was discussed. It was noted that road matters were subject to other separate legislation, and it was noted that this associated developer risk and cost. Kirklees plans should make developers very clear on how the approach should be dealt with during the planning process. Concerns of this matter were raised in the last two quarterly public rights of way forums, with the chair of the last forum stating that a senior planner would be to attend the next forum. At the previous forum,
Could you wrap up now, please, Stephen? You've had 3 minutes.
I'm finished, yeah?
Yeah, you've had 3 minutes.
Yeah. He states that protection and public rights of way and access taking opportunities to provide better facilities for users
Right.
should be considered.
Right. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. We've got one more speaker, which is Paul Butler.
Good. Should have started with my best bit, shouldn't I? Say it twice then. Okay? Right. Good afternoon. The requirement for the public right of way to be diverted is associated with the need to facilitate an approved housing development on an allocated housing site. The need to divert the public right of way was first agreed by the council when the site was identified as a housing allocation in the council's local plan in 2019. Following the adoption of the local plan, pre-application discussions took place in 2019. These discussions again confirmed the need to divert the footpath in order to facilitate the development of the site. A planning application was subsequently submitted in 2019. As you'll be aware, the planning application was approved by the council in 2021. The approved plan application outlined the proposed diversion of the definitive public right-of-way through the central area of site and also for the retention of the walked footpath route on the site's western boundary. Meticulous discussions have therefore taken place with the council's public right-of-way officers over the last 4 years to ensure that the exact details of the two footpaths would meet with their satisfaction, including levels, surfacing materials and signage. And in reference to the third party's comments there in terms of the MPPF, that would include also taking into consideration the need to enhance that route and its usability. We wish to place on record our gratitude for the way that Giles and his team have worked with us, particularly over the last 6 months. evidence of which is the receipt of limited objections to this diversion application. The objections relate to the provision of a footpath on the site's western boundary in proximity of the M62. On this specific matter, we'll respond by saying that the route shown on the plans follows that of an existing walked footpath route. Whilst the proposals will retain this route, it will importantly be made safer for people to use through erecting safe and permanent fencing between the motorway and the footpath, and through providing new permanent surfacing, which will remove any risk associated with slips and trips, which those of you who have walked the path will acknowledge. Third-party comments have also suggested diverting the central definitive footpath alongside the school's boundary. However, the proposed route was agreed in discussion with your officers, and conversations with the school have identified that they don't want the footpath to be directed along their boundary. And finally, on these points, the conditions process is entirely separate to this application, so please bear that in mind today. So to conclude, the Council have approved the principle of diverting the footpath in the manner proposed in order to facilitate the development of a site for housing on a number of occasions already over the last 4 years. The decision today is therefore related solely to whether you agree that the meticulous work undertaken by your officers has resulted in a diversion proposal which robustly responds to each of the relevant considerations. We hope you agree that it does, and can you therefore please support our application today? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as one of those members referred to by Mr. Cheetham, I would like to make some observations. We are possibly in danger of confusing the issues relating to the planning application with the issues relating to the diversion of the footpath. Now, it does seem to me that contrary to what was said certainly in the update that we've had, that the fact that a pre-commencement condition has not been discharged is not a material factor. It doesn't matter, in other words, because it's made quite clear, at least the way I read it, that the authority's view is that you don't actually need a planning application in order to carry out the procedures that are proposed. In general, I am in favour of the diversion because it does at least to some extent make sense of the line of a footpath that is required to accommodate the housing development. However, I have one issue, and I have discussed this with Giles Cheetham on an earlier occasion, and that is if you look at the plan, it shows the footpath going across the school playing field. Now, I think I am right in saying that if a school was inspected by Ofsted and Ofsted discovered a footpath going across their playing field, they would mark them down on that because that then gives access to the school grounds. So that line that goes in a northeasterly direction at the top of that plan goes across the school playing field, whereas in actual fact there is a footpath, a very well-trodden footpath that goes further to the west of that along the boundary with the motorway, which then curves round at the top end and joins the Spen Valley Greenway a bit further up. So that bit of the path is not an official footpath, and I'm not quite sure I understand why. So I'm going to reserve my position at the moment. I do acknowledge that there are two footpaths going across the site, one next to the motorway, the other much further back. That's those dotted lines. Incidentally, there is a temporary footpath that goes all the way up to Whitechapel Road at the top, along the boundary with the motorway. I'm assuming that when the development is complete, that will be removed and there will be no footpath. It goes from, point C, in a southerly direction down towards Whitechapel Road. That's a temporary footpath to allow people to walk across there while the works are going on. So, as I say, I will reserve my position at the moment because I'm really not sure about this footpath going across the school playing field.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to a couple of things, just to clarify the position in relation to this, and as I said, it has been, it is in the, there are specific points there in the member update. So just to clarify, condition 10 that's been referred to has not been discharged, and neither has condition 8 or condition 9. And I covered that in my introduction, saying that those are delegated matters further to the strategic committee decision, and submissions have been made in relation to those, and those are up on the website under the discharge of conditions applications, and there's a specific one to deal with those three. So those matters have not been concluded, they're subject to ongoing matters. Richard Gilbert is the planning case officer for those, and we are working on those as well. So in relation to a TTRO, there is a standard TTRO, so that's a temporary traffic regulation order, which is used to stop up highway to allow for work. So that's exactly the same as you'd have on the road, you know, outside the bus station or whatever, as it is for these public paths. There is one currently in place, so the path is not available at the moment and open to the public. The temporary traffic regulation order expires, I think it's the 20th of February, but it's not the 20th, it's sometime during the 20s of February this year. In other words, in a couple of weeks' time, in relation to that. I'd just say that the TTRO that there is at the moment, that was issued for the reprofiling of the land and for major sewer works. And the developer was strictly informed that it was not for above ground superstructure works. As far as the development itself is concerned, there are a number of completed houses near the entrance, but those are to the south of where we're showing on the plan at the moment, and basically where these garages are shown on the plan, plan 1. So those are where the houses are for sale, or those are the built houses are down there. The built houses are not on route A, B, C, D. We have given strict instructions to the developer to ensure that they do not undertake any superstructure works on A, B, C, D, and they have given us additional written undertakings that they will not obstruct A, B, C, D. Okay. In relation to the points raised by Councillor Pinnock, in relation to the school playing field land, basically I mentioned it in the committee report before members that north of point D you leave the site and you go on to the school land. The school does have its own palisade fencing around the school and the immediate area of the school. There isn't palisade fencing around the playing fields in their entirety, and they are not secure at the moment. If somebody walked up there, they could simply walk straight onto the playing fields as it stands at the moment. In relation to this site, this proposal, and also to do with the public access improvements that may follow from the development itself, including a pedestrian cycle link to Whitechapel Road next to the school gates, and also a pedestrian cycle link up at the north part of the site at points J and K on the plan, and also connected with a section 106 contribution in association with the 2019 planning permission for off-site improvements to multimodal links. And what that basically means is a contribution towards securing a route to link this residential development site to the Greenway at Snelson's Bridge. In relation to the fact that the path runs onto the school land, the path is currently, and has been for some considerable time, obstructed at the boundary, the boundary of the school. So in other words, the school is obstructing public footpath 42 north of point D, to put no finer point on it. So we are also, as well as dealing with these other issues, we're also in discussions with the school and with the council's PRP department relating to what is the school going to do about the fact that the public footpath is unlawfully obstructed north of this development site. Those discussions have been going on for some time, and recently I've had an informal positive response from PRP and the schools, and what I'll be looking at further to this is to investigate the possibility of making arrangements to both potentially look at diverting the public footpath, which would be probably under Highways Act Section 119 proposal, and also looking at constructing on the ground and securing a multimodal link from the site to the Greenway at Snelson's Bridge. That also involves Sustrans, and it involves other monies that we will be seeking to try and get that work done. So that's the current position in relation to that. In relation to, I think the last point that's outstanding from what Councillor Andrew Pinnock mentioned is the temporary route. So the temporary route, which is basically being on the very western boundary of the site from Whitechapel Road next to the motorway bridge, running all the way up the western part of the site up to point K. So this is the unofficial point where people have been walking northwards whilst the path has been obstructed at the school land. That is a temporary alternative route that's been offered during the temporary closure. That is not, and I mentioned this in the report to members, that is not the proposal, and as you can see from the plan in front of you, that is not the permanent diversion route proposal right next to the motorway for its entire length. The proposal is as shown on here. So the part that's H to K would be towards the motorway, but there is an alternative route, GLMD, which then links to the public open space and is a route away from the motorway. And in relation to Councillor Kath Pinnock's point about acoustic fence, the submissions for the discharge of conditions for the planning, for the acoustic fencing requirements, the plan for that does show, and in fact that was an appendix to the report, does show that the acoustic fencing is between the path HJ and the M62, and not that the path is between the acoustic fencing and the M62. I think that's everything, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Giles. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to thank Mr. Cheetham for the very detailed explanations on all the various facets of the proposed diversion, and that we're focusing on the development site as it is. What I'd like to query is, because I'm not particularly comfortable about the point that's been made where the order's being made while there are still relevant conditions that haven't been discharged. So I'd like to query whether it would be possible to, for example, to choose to follow the recommendation option 3, but to require that the order is not made until those conditions have been resolved. Thank you.
Legal Officer Sandra Haig. That's your concern about condition 10, the pre-commencement condition. If I could just come in and say something. Non-compliance with pre-commencement conditions has been tested in court, and it's both how the condition is phrased and the effect of the condition on the permission. It's basically if it goes to the heart of the permission, so that a failure to comply would make the development unlawful. A true condition precedent explicitly prohibits the commencement of the whole development before the condition steps occurred. And in the officer's view, that isn't what's happened here. Condition 10 does not control the whole development. It's one element of it, and it's not a true condition precedent. So the planning permission has been implemented it. And for the purpose of the diversion application, there is, in officer view, a valid planning permission that has been implemented. That is officer view. Anything to add? No.
Yes.
It wasn't really a question, Chair, but I think we might need someone to move the option 3, the recommendation. So I'm happy to do that.
I'm happy to second if it helps.
Chair. So the vote is to approve option 3 as set out in paragraph 6 of the report. Councillor Ramsey?
Approve.
Councillor Pervez?
4.
Councillor Lunat?
4.
Councillor Lukic?
4.
Councillor Lawson? Councillor Pinnock?
Abstain.
Councillor Gregg?
Abstain.
Councillor Hall? Okay, that's carried.
Item 10, page 37. Alice. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. My name is Alice Downham, the case officer for this application. The application is for the erection of 2 detached dwellings and detached garage at land adjacent to the Willows, Hallis Road in Kirkburton. The application is brought to the committee due to a significant volume of local opinion, with 24 representations received. The application comprises land to the front of the Willows, which is a detached bungalow. The site is located in a predominantly residential area, as can be seen on the aerial image. The site is unallocated on the Kirklees local plan. The Kirkburton Conservation Area is adjacent to the southwestern site boundary. The site slopes up. The site slopes uphill from Hallis Road to the existing dwelling. Hallis Road also slopes uphill to the northeast, which is to the left in this image. As shown in the photo, there is currently hard-standing parking and a detached garage to the front of the site, a sloped garden set back from the road, with the dwelling house occupying an elevated position to the rear of the site. 2 dwellings are proposed. The proposed 3-storey dwelling would be situated on the northern side of the site, while the proposed 2-storey dwelling would be situated on the southern side of the site. The 3-storey dwelling would have 4 bedrooms and the 2-storey dwelling would have 3 bedrooms. Since the original submission, minor amendments have been made to the front elevation to be more in keeping with the local vernacular, as requested by the Council's Conservation and Design team. Both dwellings will be finished in natural stone and concrete tiles. Officers consider that the design and materials are acceptable. On screen are site sections showing the relationship between the existing and proposed dwellings. The proposal as initially submitted included 2 3-storey dwellings. Officers raised concerns that this would cause harm to the conservation area and would be out of character with the local area. As such, plot 1 has been reduced to 2 stories, with plot 2 remaining at 3 stories, in order for a progression in height from 2 and 4 Hallis Road to the right-hand side of the lower image to 8 Little Hallis to the left-hand side of the lower image. This allows an acceptable relationship between the proposed and existing properties, including the Willows to the rear, as well as a sympathetic relationship to the gradient of Hallis Road. This is considered acceptable on balance by officers. As set out in the committee report, separation distances from existing dwellings to the proposed dwellings are considered acceptable on balance, and officers have no concerns about overbearing or overshadowing impacts on neighbouring residential properties. On screen is the site plan. There would be parking to the front and gardens to the rear. A private drive would run between the two proposed dwellings, providing access to a proposed detached garage and turning area, which would serve the existing dwelling. Officers consider that the application site is of a sufficient size to support two dwellings. Both dwellings would have parking for two vehicles to the front. The three-storey dwelling would also benefit from an integral garage, which is considered to provide another parking space in line with policy guidance. The parking provision is considered acceptable. Conditions are recommended relating to the footway to be provided to the front of the site and turning facilities to be provided, should members be minded to approve. Subject to these conditions, officers are satisfied that the application would not cause harm to highway safety. Briefly turning to the proposed detached garage, it is considered that this would be acceptable in terms of visual amenity, as it would be subservient to the existing dwelling, would be finished in materials to match the existing neighbouring dwellings and the proposed dwellings, and would be minimally visible from Hallis Road. It would have no impact on neighbouring properties. The representations received raised concerns on a number of matters which have been outlined and addressed in the committee report. In conclusion, the proposal has been assessed against all relevant local and national planning policies, taking into account the representations received. For the reasons outlined fully in the committee report, the proposal is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
We've got one speaker, which is John Robinson.
Good afternoon, members. My name is John Robinson from Farrer Bamforth Associates, and we are agents for the application. Firstly, I should make you aware that the Willows, the bungalow sitting above the site, is owned and occupied by the applicant. I mention this in case you are thinking that the development will have a detrimental amenity effect on separate third-party occupants. Now, I have lived at the top of Hallis Road in Gregory Drive development for the past 40 years. In fact, I obtained the planning permission there. I have also seen the Little Hallis development above the application site built and the Orchard Close development almost opposite the application site. Like the application before us today, all three previous development applications received objections concerning the increase in traffic on Hallis Road. However, as a long-standing resident using Hallis Road, I find the level of traffic use still perfectly acceptable, with no perceptible increase in traffic brought on by these developments. In fact, each development brought highway benefits. The top of Hallis Road was tarmac for the very first time due to the Gregory Drive development, and the footpaths were made along the site frontages of the other two developments. The same will happen on this development, which I believe will be the last development to take place on Hallis Road, thereby presenting a final opportunity for highway improvements. There will be a further length of footpath created along the site frontage, which will link up with the footpath above and take pedestrians safely further down the hill. The principle of the development on this site was established by a pre-application in January 2020, which concluded that 3 houses would be considered acceptable, subject to compliance with all relevant planning policies. However, the planning submission was only made for 2 houses, as we considered 3 was over-intensive for the site. The houses are shown as 3 stories at the front and 2 stories at the rear due to the site levels. However, concerns were raised about a 3-storey house having an overbearing effect on the cottages below the site, set at a lower level, although less so with the top house due to Little Hallis development being much higher than the site. We therefore set a notional line from the ridge of the cottages to the ridge of number 8 Little Hallis as the roof height maximum limit for the proposed houses. This has resulted in the lower house being reduced to 2 stories, with the upper house retained as 3 stories, thereby stepping up the site between the 2 existing houses and also emulating the slope of Hallis Road. Therefore, in conclusion, the site is in a highly sustainable location. Its design complies with all relevant policies in the local plan and NPPF, and there are pedestrian gains in the new length of footpath to be provided. All the Council's officers now consider the proposals acceptable, and I hope members will also and grant approval to the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Obviously, it's one that we went to see this morning, and it was a really good site visit. It is clear that for me, that there has been a lot of attention into how you can make the highways issues work, about safety for the pedestrians on that street. It looks like consideration has been taken into materials and such. I don't think the issues raised about conservation area with the new houses or the new style houses opposite are really, once you see it, you can see that they're not really as important as they sound on paper. So I would be happy to move accepting officers' recommendations.
Thanks, Jackie. Any more? Councillor Gregg, yes?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I was part of the site visit as well, so I had a quick look at the site layout, and it was good to see this. And there's been changes made to the original proposal, which looked like it was good changes because it keeps the dynamic of the buildings in line. But just a query with the officers about the parking for the bungalow, in terms, because obviously mitigating any parking on the road that might happen, it's unlikely, I think. But just to clarify, how many spaces? Is it just one space for the bungalow and a garage for the bungalow?
So through you, Chair, there's one space provided plus the garage, which would provide a second space, so 2 spaces, which is considered acceptable.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Lukic.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, interesting site visit, I think, with the topography there. I think overall it makes quite an efficient use of the site. I think it fits with the constraints. The one thing I noted while I was there was the separation distance being at 17 metres between the bungalow and the properties, but looking at the actual level difference, and it's noted in the report that from the bungalow windows would be mainly looking onto the roof of property 2 rather than into windows of that new property. So that satisfied my concerns related to that. So I'd be happy to second Councillor Ramsey's proposal for the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo what's already been said, really, and the benefit of a site visit, you know, on paper, it looked a tight squeeze. It looked almost not doable. But if you go on site, you can see how it's going to work, particularly with that drop of the extra story on that negotiated drop on that extra story. Is nice to see that these applications can be negotiated like that and come to a good conclusion. So yeah, I'm voting for this.
Right, I'm going to say I looked at it last night on Google Earth and I thought, not sure about this. So this is how important site visits are. Gives you a completely different picture of things. Any more? No, well, it has been moved by Councillor Ramsey and seconded by Councillor Lukic, so we'll go to a vote.
Thanks. The vote is to delegate approval of the application to officers. Councillor Ramsey?
For.
Councillor Pervez?
For.
Councillor Lunat?
For.
Councillor Lukic?
For.
Councillor Lawson?
For.
Councillor Pinnock?
For.
Councillor Gregg?
For.
Councillor Hall?
For.
That's carried. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Item 11's being pulled, so it's item 12, page 65. Thanks. So this is the application at Carside Crescent, Batley.
Good afternoon again, Chair and members. I'm still Alice Downham and I am the case officer for this application. The application is for the change of use of vacant land to domestic garden at 39 Carside Crescent in Batley. The application is brought to the committee due to a significant volume of local opinion, with 26 representations received. The application site is a grassed parcel of land which is bounded by a brick wall to the north and fencing and mature vegetation to the west. Carside Crescent is located to the southwest, and there is a public right-of-way footpath to the east. These are connected by a footway which runs along the southeast boundary of the site. The site is located directly to the east of 39 Carside Crescent, which is a semi-detached dwelling. The site is surrounded by residential development to three sides, with Hurstmount Junior School to the east, which is designated as urban green space in the Kirklees local plan. On screen is the red line boundary of the site as originally advertised. During the course of the application, it was discovered that an administrative error during validation had led to the red line boundary being extended to the highway, thereby including land which would not be subject to the change of use. Specifically, it included part of the footway linking Carside Crescent and the public right-of-way. This was amended and the correct red line boundary was re-advertised. Out of the 26 total representations received, there were 7 in support and 18 in objection, with 1 general comment. Out of the 18 objections, 7 solely related to the loss of the access between Carside Crescent and the public right-of-way. On screen is the correct red line boundary, which, as mentioned, was re-advertised. In terms of visual amenity, it is noted that, as a result of the change of use to domestic garden, the plot of number 39 would become somewhat larger than the neighbouring properties. However, there is some variation in plot size and shape in the surrounding local area, and as such, this is considered acceptable on balance. Furthermore, the local area is predominantly residential. As such, the change of use to domestic curtilage is considered not to cause harm to the character of the area and is acceptable. Given the nature and location of the proposal, it is not likely to cause any significant impact on the amenities of neighbouring properties. Officers are satisfied that the proposal would not result in any additional harm in terms of highway safety. In terms of the public right-of-way, given the nature of the proposed development and the small area of the site which would abut the footpath, it is considered that the proposal would not have a significant impact on the amenity of users of the prow in this instance. The representations received raise concerns on a number of matters which have been outlined and addressed in the committee report. In conclusion, the proposal has been assessed against all relevant local and national planning policies, taking into account the representations received. For the reasons outlined fully in the committee report, the proposal is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thanks, Alice. There are no speakers, which surprised me. So, it's over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, generally speaking, I'm in favour of this. I'd just like to query the necessity to put a fence round the site, which I can understand, but I'm a bit concerned that too many particularly close boarded fences will give a sort of tunneling effect, which I don't think is desirable. So I wonder whether if a fence has got to be put there, and I think that probably is true, then it should be at least partially permeable, so that it is not kind of shutting off that right of way. With that addition, I would like to move approval, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I think I might have jumped in front of Councillor Ramsey here, so apologies for that. Obviously, we had a look as well on the site visit today, and I agree with what Councillor Pinnock has said about it potentially being more of a tunnelling effect, if sort of an alleyway effect with the fence along the side. My concerns somewhat, I actually don't support the application. The reason for that is because I think that areas like this, housing developments and estates, and where there's a lot of houses, they need pockets of open space and green land. I know there's been concerns about the state of that land, and there's clearly been some dumping of rubbish there, because there's a sign that says don't dump your rubbish, so, or words to that effect. But in terms of it being a pocket of green space, I think it's a shame that the council would relinquish that land. Other residents have made comments I've seen online with regards to they've heard through the grapevine that the applicant wants to build a house there. Now, obviously, the applicant's not here to tell us in detail whether that's true or not. And in absence of that, I think I've got enough concerns to think that this is probably not the right thing for the council to be relinquishing sale of. I've not heard any really good reasons for it to be sold. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm probably of the view that if genuinely this is safeguarded for garden, then there's no reason why not. I do understand some concerns when you look at the plot that there's very little parking available there. They have to park on the road, and that there it is potentially room for further development. But if we are able to safeguard that land, then as a garden, then to some extent, well, I am happy that that's what progresses. So, did you move it? Can I second? But with those kind of provisos.
Being a councillor for the ward, I'm really glad my other colleagues have literally said what I would like to say. The area is used quite a lot as a dumping ground for rubbish, and the potential of that piece of land being proposed as a proper another residential amenity in that area where parking, and it's ever so tight anyway. It's calling out for saying, please have a look, please think about the residents before you even think about doing anything in terms of permitted development on that piece of land. So I think you've moved it and somebody seconded it, so I'll keep quiet on that bit. But yeah, it definitely needs a look at. Thank you.
Councillor Woolkich next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, based on the application that's in front of us, it's the approved use would be as domestic garden. Now, the increased overall plot size of the dwelling that would result, it might have an effect on permitted development rights for that dwelling in terms of what extensions and things could be put there. I'm not sure whether it would be necessary to impose any conditions on that. I think I'd be reluctant to. It would seem somewhat unnecessary. I understand there's going to be covenants as well on the use of the land. So on the whole, I'm happy just to support it as recommended. Thank you.
Andrew, if you no, Councillor Greg then.
Thank you, Chair. If I could ask through you to the officers just regarding the access from the main road to the rear of the building, at the rear of the pocket of land, would that be retained in the eventuality that there was extra parking put in the future? That's my only concern, because it could potentially, if there was a driveway put in ever, or an application for a driveway, that would eventually block access for the public to get through there. So in terms of just what potentially could be done to safeguard that, so that access was retained, because I think the neighbouring house has got access to a drive, and with them occupying it maybe more for a garden, the new pocket of land, if that was approved today, ultimately the current garden might ultimately end up being paved. Access for a vehicle could be parked there, could be half blocking the pathway. Now, I'm obviously hypothesising here. So I don't want to say that that will happen, but it's a concern potentially. And if it does, what safeguardings do the council have to make sure that that access doesn't get blocked? Thank you. Cheers.
Now, Chair, like I said, there's been, I think, sort of three key sort of comments which have been made. So one of them, like I said, was the highways just then. The other one was in terms of the permitted development rights. And then the first one, done the wrong way around really, but then the first one was about the details of the fence. So I think first of all, I'll pass you over to Alice, who'll just run through, like I said, the safeguards which are in place and whether you think that further conditions are needed. And then we'll address the highway issue, if that's all right. Is that all right with you, Chair?
Yeah.
So through you, Chair, I think I mentioned I did mention on the site visit that there is a condition on the sale that a fence has to be erected within 3 months, and that has to be a 1.8 metre high fence. Now, if members were minded, we could look to include a condition requiring details of that fence to be submitted to us. Councillor Gregg, you also mentioned about open space. There is a point in the report 10.6 which states that it is considered acceptable, this loss of a small area of green space which is not designated as green space. Councillor Ramsey mentioned about it remaining as garden use. We could look to remove permitted development rights on that land if members were minded to do so, to retain that as garden use. And any other future development to come forward would need planning permission in any regard. Pass to Ryan in Highways.
Through you, Chair, ranking the Highway Development Management. Should the applicant wish to provide a drive in the future, that would be subject to a separate application, and that would be assessed on its own merits and would take into consideration the existing track which has got access through to the public right-of-way and the widths which include the shared arrangement with the neighbouring property. So again, that will be subject to a separate assessment should that come forward. Thank you, Chair.
Just going back to what Councillor Pinnock had said in regard, and obviously what's in the report about the fencing as well. The area is known for a lot of antisocial behaviour and all that, and I know in terms of policing comment there's not been much there, but there's hotspots within that pocket, and I'm just thinking it ought, with us trying to keep the pathway open kind of thing, it almost closes it off and we don't know what's going on behind the fence. And we're looking at, from a ward, we're looking at putting CCTV across the road from there. So it's just other issues that people might be thinking about. Thank you.
Well, it has been moved and seconded. I would just say that when I looked at it, I was concerned about other wanting to build, etc. Probably a house that looked a bit like a giant Toblerone, judging by its shape of land. But I did have some, like you said, Aaron, about loss of a small piece of open land, but I think this safeguards it for being certainly stop fly tipping for one thing, and also it's less of a place for people to hang out and hide that are doing things wrong. So we'll go. I'm going to say we want to go to these conditions because I was concerned about driveway, where would they go, over which path, etc., etc. Because I did notice somebody who's done a nice drive that they can't get the car in because there's no drop pavement. So something to think about. Julia.
Thank you, Chair. So at the minute, as set out on page 71, there are two conditions there which are recommended. So the first one in terms of the commencement of the use on the site, so within the 3 years, so the standard time frame there. The second condition is about being in accordance with the plans. So at the minute, the plan, it is the red line of the site, so the change of use of that land into a garden area. I think from what you've discussed, I think members would like to see an additional condition regarding the details of a 1.8 metre fence along that boundary. And then members would also like to see a condition regarding the removal of permitted development rights for sort of outbuildings or any structures on that land as well, to safeguard the sort of the openness and the character of the site there. In terms of the sort of, I suppose, the hard, soft landscaping of the site, that could safeguard in terms of, do you know, like any future driveway as well, if you do actually condition a landscaping scheme. It's whether you think that condition is necessary. It is purely a change of use into a garden area. It does include that garden area in your description. So whether you think that is necessary to include that. I think it might be a bit unreasonable. Yeah. So I think just those two additional conditions then, about the permitted development right removal and the details of the fence.
Right.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to add, because there's like a bollard preventing vehicular access on that path, I think that would make it unreasonable potentially to have a condition when it's kind of landlocked from vehicular access as it is. So those two extra conditions I'm happy with.
Pinnock, seconded by Councillor Ramsden, so we'll go to a vote.
Okay, so the vote is to delegate to officers to approve with
Ramsden.
with the additional two conditions.
It all started on Saturday afternoon when England lost it. The way it's just got worse and worse.
Councillor Ramsey,
With those conditions.
with the two additional
For.
conditions.
For.
Councillor Pervez.
For.
Councillor Luna.
For.
Councillor Lukic.
For.
Councillor Lawson.
For.
Councillor Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Gregg.
Against.
And Councillor Hall.
For.
So that's carried. Thank you.
Right. By my reckoning, everybody.
That's it.
That's it. Thank you for those who turned up. We'll see you next month.
And Matthias has slept off.